This episode of CrowCast is brought to you by Harvest the Fleurieu, Adelaide's favourite family-owned strawberry farm in Mount Compass and also the Wollonga Farmers Markets. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Tuesday Night Live, a very special edition of Tuesday Night Live, brought to you, of course, by Harvest the Fleurieu, our little friends down there on the Fleurieu, picking strawberries last week. Pete, how are you going?
Yeah, very good, mate, and a big shout out to Adam Sherry, who hosted me down there at Mount Compass last Saturday. It was fantastic to get down there and a great product down there. And so once again, to Harvest the Fleurieu, thanks so much for your sponsorship. We appreciate it.
Very good. And Macca, how are you doing, mate?
Yeah, very good, thanks, mate. Looking forward to tonight. Should be a good show.
And we've got a very special guest tonight, Matt Balmer from Fox Footy and AFL Draft Central and everywhere else. How are you going, Matt?
Good, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Now, we're aware that you're a bit pressed for time, so Pete, why don't we won't even bother with music, I reckon. We'll just get right into it. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think so. And, Matt, we really appreciate you coming on and offering your time, and certainly hope that we can get a little bit of a SA perspective, I guess, because it's a bit of an unusual one for particularly our club, the Adelaide Crows, this year. We don't normally have a big part to play in the draft for one reason or another over the years. But this year we're big players, and obviously a lot of South Australian kids, and there's been plenty of publicity surrounding that. And I guess the first question I wanted to put to you was in relation to Connor Rozee, who I felt is a really interesting player in the sense that he didn't really have a magnificent champs in the under-18s, but he shot up the board with his performances in the Sandful finals, and just some really curious reporting as well about the fact that there may be a double pick on the go from Gold Coast to accompany Jack Lacosta's up there because they're great mates. And so I was just interested on your thoughts, particularly as I see on your mock you had Connor going through the port at pick 10 or pick 11 after the academy picks. So just interested on your thoughts and whether you think that there's anything at play in terms of his friendship with Luco and how you see Connor Rozee generally.
Yeah, it's an interesting one with Connor because he was the first person to admit that he didn't have a great year, and that was the reality of it. He played forward, he played back, he played midfield, he sort of played everywhere, so it was sort of tough for him to sort of get a good run at it, and he was probably a bit affected by it, but in a sense he was always a top 10 pick, so it didn't really surprise me in a sense. He's going to end up, top 10, top 15 pick for sure. There's no doubting that. The Sandful performance has always helped, and I think we saw towards the latter part of the year, he sort of found a bit of a role as that hybrid defender, sort of playing a bit across half-back and as that third back for the Roosters, and it sort of worked out well. So he's still finished his year really well, and clubs have still got him in that top 10 mix. The Gold Coast one is fascinating, and how they play it sort of remains to be seen. Jack Lacoste and Isaac Rankin seem to be the two that'll be the likely that they take it 2 and 3, but as we reported a few months ago on foxfooty.com.au, Connor Rozee is definitely in their minds. Whether that means they take him at 2 or 3 or whether they consider him at 6, as you said before, I didn't have him in the Phantom draft last week in that pick 6 because there's a lot of mail that Jai Caldwell's probably the man that will go there. But Connor's had a good year, and he's great mates with Jack Lacoste. The two have spoken about it pretty openly throughout the year.
Just a question, Matt. Macca, 23 here. Just for Macca. My question to you is, what do you think it would take to get a trade out of the Gold Coast, say, for pick 3?
I think it'll be pretty tough, and it really surprised me. And having spoken to a few of the clubs in the know and those sort of with picks around that, they find it staggering. There's a bit of talk about them even giving away a pick 2 and 3. It'd be a bit silly to consider it, but the way Gold Coast have been with losing all these players, the theory behind it is if they can if they traded out pick 3 and they ended up getting 3 other picks in the first round, well, why wouldn't you take as many picks as you can, in a sense? And I think that theory is valid, but there's a big difference between the top sort of 7 or 8 prospects and the rest of the first round in the draft. What would it take for Adelaide, for example? Adelaide's got, 8, 13, 16 and 21. One recruiter I spoke to last week, he reckons almost all 4 would need to be involved in a deal to get rid of pick 3. That's how big the premium is on pick 3. So why would you give up 3 picks for 1? I'm not too sure I'd be doing it if I was Adelaide or another club in that sort of boat.
No.
Last week, he reckons.
If that's what it takes, then I think I'd much rather rely on Ogilvy with his magic, with his 4 picks.
Yeah, absolutely. Hamish is a great recruiter, and he's done a great job over the years. And what we know is with Hamish is he won't be swayed by the Adelaide kids. He won't be swayed by what state they're from. He'll pick the best player available, and he's picked some absolute gems over the past few years. There's a lot of talk about Tom Doty, whether he was any good, or we hadn't seen him for 2 years, and people are going, well, they made a big mistake there. They probably should have taken a South Australian. Well, that's been fantastic this year, and it just shows that you've got to have a bit of patience sometimes with some of the prospects, because they can really come on.
Matt, can you foresee either at 8 or 13 that the Crows might have somebody in mind that they could recruit at that number that others probably aren't even looking at?
There's been a lot of talk lately about what Adelaide will do with pick 8, and Chase Jones seems to be the name that continues to be floated. I know I've spoken about it on the Fox Footy website a few times. Tasmanian player. Hamish has been known sort of to like the Tasmanians because that's sort of been his background, I suppose, and a guess. But Chase is a really good prospect, and if he doesn't go at 8, well, he probably doesn't get to 13. GWS are there at 9 and 11. Port Adelaide's there at 10, and I wouldn't think he gets past Geelong 12. So if Adelaide want him, they're going to have to take him with 8. And I've sort of posed the question, what would happen if Connor Rozee was there and Chase Jones was there as well? What would Adelaide do? And so that'll be a fascinating one, because that probably looks like the scenario at the moment that could happen.
That's the exact question I was about to ask you.
The other name that we seem to be linked to, Matt, is Jai Caldwell, who's certainly rocketed up into calculations. Obviously, well-publicised injuries, but just seeing a bit of scuttlebutt around that he may be in our calculations at pick 8 as well.
He's a fascinating one, Jai. It was a tough year, a lot of injuries. Where does he fit in? I sort of wasn't too sure at the start. I think, the mail at the moment I'm hearing is it's Gold Coast at 6, but if he gets through there, where does he go? That's the next question. Does Adelaide take him at 8? There's been a bit of talk that Bailey Smith might be a chance there at 8 if he gets past the Dogs at pick 7. There's a lot of scenarios to play out here. I think Jai is well and truly going to be a top 10 pick. You can take that one to the bank, but what club he ends up at, well, we'll see.
Just on the way you've been speaking there, Matt, you've actually thrown quite a few names into that top 10 that weren't in there, say, like a couple of weeks ago. So obviously there's things you're hearing or reading that indicate that it wasn't as it was a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, things always change, and I think you speak to clubs, and the mail's generally pretty good around this time of year. And over the last months, they've spent a lot of time at the draft combine, and once the season's finished, they've pretty much just been focusing on the draft for the last 2 months. So they've been really knuckling down and working out all these prospects. Clubs have been flying into state. They've been meeting with clubs. They've been meeting with players. Sorry, I should say. So they've been going all right around the country, picking out the final little aspects of the little prospects that they're going to have to possibly draft. They want to know everything about them.
Matt, one of the players that certainly turned into my draft crush, for want of a better term, is Jackson Haitley. I really like what he brings, and saw quite what your thoughts are and where he gets to. He seems to be sort of hovering around about that sort of 10 or 11 area. Did you see that's where he's going, or have you heard much about his possible position?
Yeah, he's another sort of interesting one, because I think he just had what your thoughts are with Central, but his season was pretty good, but it's hard to gauge sort of those inside midfielders that just continue to get the ball and they continue to get the job done. I think he fits in that 10 to 15 range. And they sort of suggested that he'd be in that next run of players after that sort of pick 10 range. So maybe Port Adelaide have got plenty of inside midfielders, so it would surprise me if they took someone like Haitley. I think it's probably someone more likely, like GWS at 11 will consider it. Geelong at pick 12 have been linked to a lot of the inside midfielders, which suggests to me that Jackson Haley's in the mix there. And then, of course, Adelaide's got their pick 13. Fremantle, I don't quite think take him at 14. And if you got to Port Adelaide at 15, well, they'd probably have to consider him there.
Any likely bolters that you're hearing anything on, Matt?
There's always a few every year. I think Zach Butters is one that we probably thought would always be around the 20 mark, and he seems to be one that has been linked to Adelaide at 13 and been linked to sort of Fremantle at 14. And in all reality is a few whispers are that he might not even get there. So he could go even earlier than that, which is a bit of a surprise to me. He's sort of really jumped up the order. We know Sam Sturt's been the real draft bolter in the second half of the season. He's gone from just a local school footy prospect to a first round prospect. Luke Valenti's an interesting one. He's invited to the draft, which surprised a few recruiters who have sort of got him ranked in that 25 to 30, but other clubs are saying no, he's definitely a 10 to 15 prospect. Where he ends up will be interesting. I think Adelaide will consider him with that 16-ish pick, but it remains to be seen. There's a lot of prospects and there's a lot to play out, even with a week to go.
Well, there's a South Australian lad, Valenti. Does he add something to what Adelaide needs at the moment? Because while I think he's a reasonably good player, he hasn't got a heap of speed. And if anything, that's what Adelaide need to add to their midfield is pace.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the question. I think, do they need another inside type that's sort of at one pace, and which Haley is? So it might sort of... We'll see what sort of happens with 8 and 13. Bailey Smith's got good aggression and good speed, so if they could nab him at 8, that'd be perfect. And Haley, I mean, might just be the best available at 13, 16, and they have to take him. But who knows? It's the reality. They might see a different role for him. Not every inside midfielder has to be super quick.
No, the one advantage of Haley, of course, is he's got size. He's a very tall midfielder, and we've seen that. Like with Carlton and other teams that have got tall midfielders, they don't have to be lightning quick.
No, they don't. No, and that's the thing. If you find a right role for the player, well, the speed won't be too much of a factor.
Now, Matt, we've also, as with any situation, we've got to have half an eye on our nemesis across the road.
Yes. What will Port Adelaide do?
They have what will they be doing, and how will that impact us, I guess? And so they obviously have pick 5. I certainly I heard a little bit of scuttlebutt that Connor Rozee is on their radar, possibly even as high as 5. So I don't know. Have you heard much about the nemesis across the road?
For me, at Port Adelaide at pick 5, I'd be really surprised they don't take one of the King twins. And that's sort of the mail that I continue to hear and continues to get talked about sort of over here. If Max King managed to get through from St Kilda, I'd be really surprised if Port didn't take him. And at the same boat, I think they'll consider Ben King with his flexibility. Is Connor Rozee in their top 5? Well, I don't really know. I haven't spoken to them and they haven't told me, and they won't tell me, so I don't exactly know. But for me, I just think they're probably just going to take the best available. And if they think the King twins, who are absolute guns and they're absolute superstars in a sense, they should take them. And they shouldn't think about Rozee. And we heard Jason Cripps a while ago speak about it. If these guys go up to Gold Coast, we'll fight and bring them back in 2 years type of thing. Well, hey, if Connor gets through, There's talented South Australians every year, and it's pretty tough to overlook them in a sense. But you can't just get stuck in your ways and say, oh, no, we're only going to take South Australian kids, and you overlook a really good Victorian star or a WA star in a sense. So I think they'll take a King twin with pick 5. If Connor managed to get there to pick 10, I think they'd snap him up. Jordan Clark seems to be another name linked with them at pick 10, and then pick 15 will be sort of a wait and see who gets through. Hopefully for them, they'll have someone that gets through.
Just quickly on the King twins, it's an interesting issue, the fact that obviously they are identical twins. And are you getting much hesitance or noticing any hesitancy in terms of those two, being forced to play in different states, and how that will impact upon them, and whether they'll eventually obviously want to go back into the same state together?
I think they're both realistic. They know that it's probably not going to happen, or it's very unlikely to happen. There's only a couple of scenarios that can happen. It's either Gold Coast at 2 and 3 and 6, or Port Adelaide at 5 and 10. There's no real other way. They won't get to 8 and 13 or 9 and 11 to GWS, I wouldn't have thought. But yeah, it's interesting. I think obviously they'd love to stay together, and they've said that openly, and as every draft prospect does, they want to stay in their home state, but they know the realities of the game is you've got to go into state, you've got to look elsewhere. So I think they know. I think they'll be fine. We see Paul Connors' clients all the time. They re-sign for 2 years. They stick around at their club. Whatever happens in the future, hey, who knows? But if you create a great environment and a great place to play football, why would you want to leave? And that's always my thought. We've seen what happened at Gold Coast, but look at Brisbane. They were a basket case 3 years ago, and they've turned it around. Guys like Alex Witherden, Jared Berry, Hugh McCluggage, they wouldn't leave for a heartbeat. So if you build a great footy club, they won't go anywhere.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You mentioned with the Kings again, the King twins. You didn't mention the possibility of St Kilda, who have had is it Max King training with them all the time. That they might be interested in him.
Yeah, no, they're definitely interested. The St Kilda pick is a tough one, and what they do is, God, someone said, one of the club, rival interstate club recruiter said to me today, they'd be really stupid to overlook Max at 4, and they would be, because Max is an absolute star. But hey, St Kilda might think they want a midfielder, so they might take Bailey Smith, and that means Max gets through. Max is the obvious selection, and I hope they take him, and they should. And they won't look silly, whatever they pick, but we've seen what's happened with them in the past. They took Paddy McCartan over Christian Petrarca, which, hey, they were happy to back themselves in, but at the moment it doesn't look great. We'll see what happens in a few years' time, but I think they should take Max King at pick 4.
Matt, any surprises down the draft a little bit with Adelaide's later picks? Are you hearing anything about, say, a Woodcock or someone like that?
Yeah, the hard picks are always hard to play, so you can't sort of go into it with any assurity. Boyd Woodcock's a weird one. Where he falls is a bit unknown. It's probably somewhere in that 40-plus bracket, but we see guys like that with their size sort of slip down the order, or they could go even earlier because one club likes them. I think, they've got 8, 13, 16, 21. The pick 21, they might go at all. There's been a lot of talk about Bailey Williams, or even a bit on Kieran Briggs from GWS Academy, but time will tell. The later picks are always hard to tell. I haven't heard too much mail about who they like. Again, they probably maybe lean towards a South Australian, but at the end of the day, again, they'll pick the best player.
Yeah, the question I was going to ask before was, where do you see Rankin as going? Do you think that the Gold Coast will definitely take Rankin at 3? Or why would they not be interested in the King twins, given the fact that they've lost both bookends at the moment?
It's a good point. I think Isaac will go to Gold Coast. It'd be a big surprise for me if it doesn't happen. I just don't think they take the King twins. There's numerous reasons. I just think that maybe not a great suit for them. I think obviously they've lost these two talls, but you've got to remember Max and Ben King aren't coming in and playing senior footy from round 1 next year, so they don't exactly fill the hole that Tom Lynch and Stephen may have left. These guys are going to be future stars, but you're going to have to give them 2 years in the gym, or they're going to have some time. Hey, they might play senior footy in 2019, 2020, but they're not playing 22 games for the next 2 years. So I think that'll be under consideration. And the 2 Gold Coast mates thing, hey, they'll consider it, but they'll just take the 2 best players. And if they've got their 2 best players, the Lukosius and Rankin, they'll take Lukosius and Rankin. They won't take the King twins. They'll just take the 2 best available.
Well, Matt, I know that you're in a bit of a rush tonight, and we absolutely appreciate your time and coming on with us and having a chat about in particular the South Australian perspective. Congratulations on your mock. It was obviously well thought out and put together. Any final questions before we go, lads?
Yeah, Matt, Donkey McGoo here. I was just wondering, I've heard a lot about how this draft is very good, and I'm sorry if this got asked while I wasn't here, but I heard the draft is very good. In terms of where players would have gone in previous drafts or players from previous drafts gone in this one, how deep does it go? Like, where would Rayner and those sorts of blokes be going if they were being selected, next week?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I know there's been a lot of talk about the depth in the draft. It's probably similar to what last year's was, in a sense that I think one club recruiter said to me earlier in the year, it drops after pick 30. It's a big cliff. It's probably not wrong. It's the same last year. Where Rayner would sit, it's an interesting one because you're comparing Cam Rayner as a half-forward midfielder to Sam Walsh, a classy on-baller. So it's hard to compare. I'd have Rayner in that top 5 clearly. where I'd put him, I haven't really put too much thought into it. I think there's some really classy players at the top end. My top 5, it was hard to split between sort of Lukosius, Rankin, Walsh, Max King. You know, some clubs would throw in Nick Blakey. There's so many guys up there that are right in that mix. So, Rayner would be right up in that top 5, that's for sure, if we were doing a draft in the same year.
Terrific. Look, thanks, Matt. As I said just before, really appreciate your time. And I know you've got a bail, so all the best for the busy time of year that you've got coming up.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on. Make sure you click back to foxfooty.com.au and we'll keep you posted for the next week and a half.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. Very nice.
Thanks,
really appreciate your time, mate.
Yeah, thanks,
No worries, guys.
Bye. Tom, what do we think about all of that? Any surprises?
Well, I think Matt made it pretty clear that, in his opinion, and he's probably right, Gold Coast won't be trading out any picks, certainly not 2 or 3, and which means that, and he seemed pretty adamant in his own mind, that would be Walsh at 1 and Lukosius and Rankin at 2 and 3, and then it could be a little bit of a jumble after that because not being sure what St Kilda might take. So I think we certainly got out of that in his opinion, the first 3 are locked away, and the Gold Coast won't be trading those first 2 picks.
I think you're right, Macca, and that was certainly just before we came on air and we were having a quick chat to Matt. He was very, very strong on that. That he saw absolutely no way at all that those 3 picks were changing. That they were absolutely locked in. Possibly a little bit of movement with St Kilda with Bailey Smith v Max King, depending on whether they decide they want to go for a mid or a tall. I thought the really interesting thing also that came out of that is that he mentioned that he'd heard, and he keeps hearing around the traps, that Port Adelaide are right into the Kings at 5.
Yes,
that if Max slips through, then he'll definitely go at 5 to Port. But even if he doesn't, then there's a good chance that they'll snap up Ben King at 5.
Wow, missing piece.
I thought that was really interesting.
Very surprising. I would be. I don't know where. I mean, I guess they are a bit light on for tools down back. But I reckon it's a big gamble, irrespective of what he says about take the best player and back your culture and all the rest of it. I mean, history shows, and no disrespect to Matt, but he's coming from a Victorian perspective and perhaps doesn't quite understand, the difficulties of keeping players at the best of times, let alone one half of a set of twins. I must admit I'd be surprised if Port take King.
If we're being brutally honest with ourselves, though, and I put this to all of you: has Port had a better record at retaining their top Victorian players than what we have?
Yes, they have. They certainly have. Although surprisingly, they lost 2 South Australians this year.
Well, I know that's the crazy one out of it. But players like Gray and Wines, and they attracted Ryder and they attracted Dixon. All Victorians. I don't know. I wonder whether they back themselves and say, well, Ollie Wines said that he didn't want to come to South Australia either before he was drafted, but they just took him, and now you couldn't see him leaving.
Well, that wouldn't surprise me if they did. And although if Bailey Smith was available, he probably is the type of mid that they need as well, because they've got plenty of big-bodied mids. But they haven't got any mids that have got real zip, pep or pace, and neither have we. So, I would have thought that if he's available, Smith's available, you just grab him.
I'll tell you why I'm mentioning it and why I think it's so interesting is because the impact, obviously, that it has on our pick 8. Because it seems to me that if Rankin goes at 3, if Port are into the Kings at 5, and that then, and we also know from Matt that Gold Coast are very keen on Jai Caldwell at 6, leaves Bailey Smith at 7, and then of course, which means then that Connor Rosie slips all the way through to us at 8, which I think would be a great result.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. And
I don't think there's any way that we take Chase Jones ahead of Connor Rosie. if that's in that scenario.
I'd be amazed. I would be amazed if we did.
Yeah, me too.
And I must admit, I know that Chase has bumped up the ratings a little bit of late, but he's a smallish midfielder, a small and light midfielder, and yes, he does get the ball. But he got a lot of the ball for the Allies in the under-18s. But I don't think it's the same as the form that Rosie's shown at SANFL level, particularly in his finals campaign. I don't think we're taking Chase Jones with our first pick. We may well take him with our second. But I don't think he gets past. To be honest with you, I don't think he gets past Rosie or Haitley if either of those two are available at either of our picks.
Yeah, I'd certainly support that. The thing about Rosie, he did show he had a very good final series at Sample level, which showed that he can play, and he's a very versatile player, and he's got a little bit of pace, he's got a little bit of everything really, and he's a very good player, and he could certainly find a spot in our side in the long term and play 200 games. So why would you not take him?
Oh, I think they would. I'd be amazed if they didn't take Rosie at 8. With everything that he did in the Sample Final Series, everything that he showed, his pace, his versatility, play at all areas of the ground. It's just everything I think that they're looking for. And I think, Finn, you're right. And also, Matt touched upon the fact that Port really don't seem to be in the market for a bigger midfielder, so that could see Jackson slip through to us at 13 as well, which would, depending on whether Hamish sees his Jackson on the talent list as we do. But if he does, then he may well be there for us at 13.
Yeah, I really like Haitley. I think he's got that size. To have a midfielder of that size and ability. I think it just adds another different ingredient into your midfield. And the way I see it is that, say we had Rosie, the utility that can he could be on a half-back flank or a forward flank or in your midfield. And say if we took Haitley at 13, I think at 16 and 21 we would be looking between those two spots for an outside midfielder with plenty of pace and possibly a taller key position player or probably a key position player if there is any available in that range.
The other interesting one that comes out of Matt's mock draft was Luke Valenti. I have to be honest and say I haven't done a lot of research on him, but he has been invited to the draft. So it's obviously he's going to be picked up in that first round. So it will be interesting to see where he falls. He had a solid champs, and I think he had some injury.
Well, more than solid, Pete. He was our MVP.
He was an All-Australian, wasn't he? Yeah, no, he was a great. Yeah, sorry, you're right.
Yeah,
I've undersold him there. So you're right. He was very, very good. But I think he might have been injured afterwards, and didn't get much time for Norwood as he would have liked.
No.
Do I have that right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's 186 and 80. Probably reminds me of a Tyson Edwards type. Reasonably smooth and a good all-round player without any weapons, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
But good leadership quality. Obviously, he was a state captain and, a well-rounded footballer. I'd actually be surprised if he goes first round, but I wouldn't be surprised if he goes in the top 25.
The way I look at it, certainly from... I can't see us taking both Valenti and Haitley because they are good midfielders, but not really speedy midfielders.
Yeah.
And Haitley's got the one advantage of the bigger size and strength. So for me, that's why one of the reasons I rather like him. And
so I think. Oh, sorry, Macca, go.
No, all I was going to say is, and for that reason, although Valenti's I think will be a good AFL player. He's probably. I don't think he fits our needs.
I think the surprising thing, and that I did read somewhere, and I know Matt mentioned it in the interview just then, was that he did get an invite to the first round of the draft.
Yeah.
So we assume that someone's taking him.
Yeah, they don't hand him out lightly.
No. Particularly the format this year with, it being an all-singing, all-dancing extravaganza for the first round. You wouldn't have thought that they'd invite too many hangers on. The other one I thought was interesting that Matt brought up was Bailey Williams at pick 20. He's got him in. Williams is a ruckman, come forward, nearly 200 centimetres, and takes a good mark. Do we think that we're going to blow a top 20 pick on a project ruckman that may not stay?
No, I reckon it just depends on Pete's mail. I think because I was thinking about what we would pick if we're picking for needs, and I feel like if we're going to look somewhere, we look someone that's going to replace Talia in a couple of years. I don't know. I think if Pete's mail's right, I don't think we look at a ruck.
Yeah, I'm with you, Don. I think that we would probably be more likely to go for a tall defender than a ruckman. I think we've got enough of that, and we've got some mail via Pete regarding some moves next year. I don't think Bailey Williams comes to us. I mean, clearly Matt's identified a need that we do have in the ruck department, notwithstanding that we've got Riley O'Brien and possibly Hunter in the wings. But I think identifying the need that we might have doesn't equate to a top 20 pick for a ruckman, I don't think.
There was... I did read some thought of whether we put in a bid on one of the GWS Academy lads. I think his name is Briggs, who is a ruckman, and potentially sort of in that 20 to 25 kind of category. So that's another one to look out for, whether we pop in a bid at maybe 21.
I'm not sure. I don't know, Pete, to be honest with you.
Sorry, that was a showstopper.
Yeah.
No, it's just something I read. Briggs, I can't think of his first name, but it's lad by the name of Briggs is a ruckman, said to be a bit of a not in terms of size, weight yet, but a bit of a Mumford clone in the way that he plays, comes out of the GWS Academy, and so he is someone that we could potentially put a bid in and to see what GWS want to do with him.
I don't think we'd take a bid on a ruckman. Do you, Pete?
Look, I tend to think that we'll probably just hold it over until next year. That's my feel, but I think it's a possibility. I guess if we were looking at someone like Bailey Williams, then maybe it's something we would look at putting in that bid.
Yeah,
just as a possibility.
I think picked up to pick 21. That's having 4 picks inside 21 is excellent, really, and I don't think that we would waste one of those picks on a project ruckman.
Yeah, Simon on the Facebook chat talking about Bailey Williams and talking about how he was a top 10 in the 20-metre sprint. No doubting his ability at all, Simon. To be honest with you, I just feel like the days of spending a high pick on a ruckman that may not play for 3 years or 2 years are gone. And I wouldn't like to see us spend a top 20 pick on a ruckman, no matter how good he was.
No, I agree. I wouldn't like to see it at all.
Pete, you've had a pretty good look at it. If you had your ideal result from our 4 picks, what would be the 4 players you'd like to get?
Oh, look, if a play, this is putting aside, the potentials for major mega draft swaps and the like.
Absolutely, yeah.
So this is just us keeping our picks. Look, I would be absolutely over the moon if Connor Rosie slipped through to 8, and I'm heartened by Matt's intel that Port Adelaide may well be into the Kings, because I think that would see Connor slip through to us. I think he would be an excellent pickup. 13, looking at an ideal world, I think we'd stay on the pace the pacey players, and so at 13, what's his name? Is it Chase Jones? Chase. What's his surname? Sorry.
Yeah.
Chase Jones.
Yeah.
Wouldn't mind seeing him slip through. And the other one that I'd be happy if he slipped through would be now that I've had a really good look at him, is the lad from Western Australia.
Ian Hill?
No, Clark. I think it's Jordan Clark.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think that he looks like an absolute rip snorter. And so if we could get one other pacey player through there, then I guess 16, you might hope that Jackson slips through. There's a possibility. Or Riley Collier-Dawkins maybe slips through, so the bigger body type. Mm-hmm. So I think what you want in those first two picks is you really sort of good pace, good versatility, and into the midfield, and then maybe someone with the bigger body lads at 16, and then even at 21, depending on who slips through. So that's kind of how I would see it.
21's an interesting pick, isn't it? Because it's the first pick on the next day. If I'm right in that, is that correct?
Yeah, I think it would be.
It's pick one. It's pick one of the second round. So the second. So
it would be this following day.
Yeah. So they've got. They can sit back and have a chat and have a look at what's gone and watch maybe they thought would have gone, and without having these 5-minute stuff. Although there is plenty of time, I guess. But they can then have a look at what they've landed with their first three picks and balance that up with the rest of the players that we've got, and then that will identify even more clearly. I think at 21 they would be picking more for needs rather than possibly the best, unless there's one that really is one out the box that's really slid down there. So I think that that pick 21 could be a little bit more valuable than you think at first thought.
Yeah, it's a good point, Mako. It's a good point that they will have that time to sit and reassess and see who may have slipped through the net.
Yeah. Pick one of day two.
Yep. And then
it's bloody cricket now, isn't it?
Mm.
Yep. But it's the interesting thing is that if we're only going to take those 4 picks, we're obviously the first night we're there and we're very, very busy on the first night. We have 3 picks, and then if the second day, we have got the first pick. And if we're not going to pick anymore, it's all over then.
Yeah, home time early.
Yeah, so I don't know what we plan to do with our the later 2 picks, but that we've got. But
we just don't have the spots, do we? We actually just don't have play vacancies on the list for them, do we?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, depends whether we run with 30. We're probably going to run with 38 and 6, which is what a lot of teams are running with now, in terms of 38 on the main list and 6 on the rookie list, and which means that there's not really that much point in having 40 on the main list, because otherwise you're paying higher rates for 2 players that you can get away with paying lower rate by putting them on the rookie list.
Mm.
And the very fact that you can now use those players on the rookie list without any upgrading, etc. You can treat them as a normal player for selection purposes. So there is not much point in going past the 38 point.
Well, we only the wiser after our learned colleague from Fox Footy. I don't know whether we
I feel, without wanting to press the point, I do feel, as I said, heartened by his intel on Port. That's the one that was a bit, and also I think he's, he seems very, very solid on there won't be any spectacular, and we still hang on to the hope that Donkey's Impo will come through, and we might still snag pick 3, but we'll see what happens. But certainly, if Port, it is a critical swing in terms of how the draft plays out, because if they leave that, if they're not obsessed with that SA talent, if they're happy to go for a Ben King, then then you can pretty much guarantee that Rosie gets through to us. The only risk would be Gold Coast at 6.
Yeah.
To have all the 3 SA boys. But I know that Matt mentioned Jai Caldwell at 6, and I have heard a bit about that here and there.
7, you mean?
Gold Coast at 6.
At 7.
Yeah, Gold
Coast got picked 6.
They have 6.
Oh, sorry.
Footscray got picked 7.
Yeah.
So I've heard a little bit of scuttlebutt that Gold Coast are keen on Jai Caldwell. So if that plays out, Footscray will be absolutely Monty's to take Bailey Smith if he drops all the way through to 7.
Yeah, I think so.
And that would let Connor Rosie at 8. So yeah, anyway, that was the interesting thing that really came out of it for me.
Oh, the other is I think just elaborating a little bit further on what you said, Pete. What came out of it? Firstly, he's locked in 1, 2, 3, and saying that won't change. So if there's going to be any trading of draft picks in that first top 10, it would be with St Kilda at 4, if at all. Personally, I'm probably of the opinion that I'm happy if we keep our 4 picks because the guys that they really did want was Lukosius and Rankin, and if he's right with what he's saying, and I think it's starting to get more and more firmer that that's probably going to be right, Lukosius and Rankin at 2 and 3, well then that's out of our ball game, and but the ones that are going to sort of shape what the draft. What our draft is St Kilda at 4 and Port Adelaide at 5 because there were certain assumptions made about St Kilda would take Max King and then Rosie would go to Port at 5, etc. And that is sort of shaping up differently at the moment. And who knows what it will actually be, because a lot of guesswork. But I think you can lock in the first 3. And the one thing I think is pretty confident, we will have the choice of a very good player at 8.
Most definitely, and regardless of what's whether my info comes good or not, the one thing I've always sat back and thought is the amount of talent we're going to be able to pick in with 4 picks under the pick we took Matt Crouch with is just going to set us up for a very long time. I think we've drafted well over the last 3 or 4 years and brought in the right type of players, so I'm not actually worried about the cliff we're going to face in a couple of years when a few current stars get older, because I think they're going to be replaced. So I think if we get this draft right, it's going to be something that sets us up for a very long time.
I think the really interesting scenario for us also is if Port do snatch Rosie at 5 and Gold Coast stick with Caldwell at 6, that's going to leave Footscray with picks either Smith or Ben King, depending on what their first immediate need is, which means one of those 2 slips through to us at 8. I've been pretty vocal about picking up a Ben King, purely because he's a twin and all that goes with it. I know we've talked about it before. Do we back ourselves to take a Ben King? Do we back ourselves to take a Bailey Smith? You would think that on talent we would have to take one of the 2.
Well,
I'd take a Bailey Smith. I don't know about King.
Interestingly, King is exactly the type of guy that we were talking about a few minutes ago with regards to a key defender for Talia's spot. He's the perfect replacement for Daniel Talia. He's played a fair bit down back as well as playing up forward and shown good prowess as a defender. But gee whiz, you worry, don't you?
That's what I am worried about, the fact that is that, as Matt quite rightly said, they're not going to be playing immediately. They're going to be 2 years playing in the 2s. And if he's playing in the 2s for 2 years and then his contract runs out and he can pop off back to Victoria and play with his brother or play in the same state as his brother, well, then that's a genuine risk. It's got to be a risk.
And I think Bailey Smith is probably less of a risk, but he is still a risk if you read his bio and his background. He is still a risk. There's no question about that. he has got Dangerfield written all over him.
Yeah, I agree with that, Pete.
He's got, a very close family. He's in a very, very committed relationship with his girlfriend, and he's in a very, very it's a very close relationship with both families. It's got Moggs Creek written all over it. And if poor old Bailey gets drafted to Adelaide, he's going to be leaving 2 families and a girlfriend.
Yeah.
We all know how that ends up.
Maybe if Port grab him, they can get him to hang out with Jack Watts, then get rid of that problem.
Yeah, well, that's it. So anyway, I think that it's just an interesting one, because I think that your talent board forces you to take one of the two. But I guess they'll work it out, and they'll know who's the lesser risk, I guess.
Yeah, the one thing I feel very confident in, Ogilvy's just had such a fantastic record with his under 30 picks in the last, say, 5 years. I don't think he's made one blue in that time, and he's got 4 of them this time. So,
well, I don't think he's going to. I don't think, particularly at pick 8, Macca, I don't think he's going to make a mistake.
No.
But the thing is that Hamish delivers them, and then that's it. He's on to next year. It then becomes the club environment and everything else. It's not Hamish's responsibility as to whether these kids stay or go. So I don't think he'll make a mistake. It looks like he barely could make a mistake with that top 8. But it's going to be a case of whether old Hamish is back in the same boat again, trying to cover Lever, McGovern, all the.
So it looks like it's not panning out the way that we may have thought it was panning out a few months ago, with regards to both South Australian clubs going all in for South Australian talent. How does that sit with us?
Well, me, very comfortably, because of the fact that, when you reflect on where we normally are in the draft position, our first draft position is often around about the 13, 14 mark. And we always look at see the South Australian talent go, and we've never thought about chasing it before. And just because we're in a situation where we've got an opportunity, because we've got a little bit of ammo, let's use our ammo to get a list for the future. And we've got opportunity to get 4 good players this year. And I would hate to see us blow some of those picks.
I think are a bit different to us. I think they've gone pretty hard at positioning themselves, and it'll be interesting to see whether they've done that for effectively, Rosie or Rankin, because it'll be one of those two, depending on what Gold Coast decide.
Mm-hmm. But then people are saying, talking about the possibility of them taking a king rather than a.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, obviously, but we won't know that until draft day. So yes, there is some scuttlebutt that they might take a king, but if we just look at Port's position and how they've got to that position, they've happily pushed out Polek, who was one of their top 5 players this year.
Yeah, he had a good season.
And they've pushed out Wingate, who was really 2 or 3 years ago was a franchise player, and one of the stars of the AFL. It's one of the he was their brand, and they've pushed him out. So they have, although that they may not be involved in any great sort of sacrificial trades on trade night, they have given up a hell of a lot to put themselves in the position that they're in, as well as the trading of the all of their second and third round picks to move up the draft as well, which they did during trade. So they have, they've given up big. So it will be interesting to see, now that they've got themselves to pick 5, what the motivation for that has been.
Very good point. And the other thing, Fiend, just to answer your other question about are we comfortable about, for example, not trading. If you go back and look at history and look at how many years you want to go back and look at the top 10, and the best players of those years aren't necessarily out of the top 10, because there's always players that they just develop just that little bit later, but they come and they turn out to be the real gun. So that happens time after time. So while it seems it's great that we actually are in the top 10, the very fact that we're in the top 20, I think, gives us every opportunity of getting very, very good players.
See, I have to disagree. I feel like we play too conservatively. I think the conservative approach is to take 4 good picks into the draft, 4 first-round picks into the draft. That's a solid tactic that no one's really going to criticise, because how could you? And yet there are players from South Australia who are not only very talented, but also very talented in positions that we need. And to me, I'm disappointed that the club hasn't been more aggressive over the past 2 seasons with regards to positioning itself appropriately to have a dip at these lads.
I understand what you're saying, but I think you can get too enamoured by the fact that they are South Australians.
No, I don't think so at all, Macca. I don't think so at all. Why?
Could I finish?
Go on.
What I was going to say was, the fact is that while, yes, we seem to leak almost one a year, that we do retain a hell of a heap of them. I mean, Sloan and the Crouch brothers, and et cetera, et cetera. They are very, very good players, and they're Victorian. So I don't want to limit ourselves just so that we chase South Australian and give up an opportunity of establishing ourselves for the future.
The players that we lose, though, Macca, are the bona fide cream of the crop. Dangerfield, Phil Davis, those sort of blokes, notwithstanding the reasons, but they're the blokes.
Well, Davis, no choice.
Notwithstanding the reasons, but the fact is that we lose those blokes. And, Matt Balmer commented quite rightly that the top 8 this year are cream and probably all have a right to a top 3 or 4 spot in most other drafts. And the fact that we've remained outside of that top 8, where at least 2 and potentially 3 South Australian boys sit, doesn't sit well with me.
All right, well then, who's going to trade with you, and what's it going to cost you?
Well, I mean, that's a bit of a silly question, because the damage has been done, because we now have the picks that we have. I feel like we could have done more earlier to position ourselves better to have a dip at a top 4 or 5 pick. It's actually criminal that we haven't positioned ourselves to take Isaac Rankin. Criminal. If ever there was a team that needed a quick forward/midfielder, it was us. You could argue that Jack Lukosius as well, but particularly Isaac Rankin should have been number 1 on our radar from a long way out, Macca. And we've been quite passive. Look we can laugh at Port Adelaide, but look what Port did to get themselves in the top 5. And essentially Port now have the opportunity to take a South Australian kid if they want it.
Well, then congratulations to them, but they've lost 2 very good players in the process.
Yeah, but it wasn't really that at all, though, Macca. They lost Chad Wingard, who hasn't performed anywhere near his peak for the last probably 3 seasons, arguably 4 seasons. And they lost an outside player who, whilst he had a very good season, is probably his first really consistent season for the club and for his AFL career. And they got top dollar for him.
Look, they did all right out of the trade, no doubt about that. But by the same token, they've lost a player that has got very, very good pace, and one of the rare players in their team that can hit a target.
Yeah, but I'm not worried about what they did. What I'm pointing at is that they've taken a risk to get themselves in the top half a dozen of the draft. Now, we had far more currency. We had Mitch McGovern on the table, and far more currency. We didn't trade, put any future first round picks on the table that we're aware of. And I feel like we could have done more in the lead up to get ourselves up the list.
I wonder, Fiend, just if I can jump in there, I wonder whether, we've got an idea that Rosie may be on the slide to us. And it may well be that we're satisfied with that, given what would have to be given up to get ourselves up to Rankin territory. I wonder if they have an inkling, or maybe I think it's pretty common knowledge that they all talk to each other. I think that they probably know what the top 10 is going to be. And if we've got an idea that Connor is on his way down to us, it may well be that we've decided that that's who that in terms of relative cost and the ability of the player, they may well be thinking, look, he's a need, he's a want, he's on the he's in our top couple in the talent list. We're happy to stick an 8 and have him slide down to us. Just putting it out there as a possible thought.
Look, it's quite possible, Pete. It's quite possible, but there are a lot of variables and intangibles in that could play out on draft night. We certainly are an outside chance, perhaps, of getting Connor, but he's got to get past a few clubs to get to us. And I put this to you: would you have been in favour of sending McGovern, Ellis Yeoman, and pick 8 and a future first to Carlton for pick 1?
Oh, look, I certainly would have been in favour of something of that nature, something that was aggressive. Absolutely. I was always in your camp, because I've always been, as you well know, a big G for getting in South Australian talent where, that they're not, behind in terms of the talent list. And I think that over the last few years, we've got better at that, because we went through a period where we overlooked a number of SA kids that have proven to be top players. And so I was always on the side of being aggressive to try and get up into that top 3 or 4 to try and get a crack at Luco or Rankin. No question about it. And I'll be like, if we miss out on all 3, I mean, I'd be really, really happy if at some point we're able to pick up Jackson Haitley, because, now I've said my piece on him, but I would be bitterly disappointed. No question. I would be disappointed if we didn't get one of the top 3.
Yeah, and
I do understand that, and you are right. In one particular point, we were outpointed by Port in that trading period when we could have. There's no reason why we couldn't have actually got into that position that they did, and because the deal that they did with Freo, I thought that they did very, very well out of that.
And it was just picks.
Yeah, that was
not one player involved, just picks.
Yeah, no, I think that's the one that we really missed out on. That was a smart move they made, which helped set them up for the rest of it. And I think that's where they done us in cold. I am disappointed that we didn't do that at that stage, because I feel at that stage we could have done that and still had a very strong list going into. So we could have had that pick. And still gone into the draft with a very, very good array of talent, of picks to get good talent. But I think the bird has flown. And St Kilda's our only hope, I believe, for a trade. And if the trade is something like we have to give, like maybe 8 and 16 or 8 and 21 or whatever it is, for 4 and 29 or whatever it is, their first pick after their first rounder. I'm all for that. I'm all for that. But I don't know whether they'll do that. I think they will ask for some exorbitant thing, and which I think would be selling the farm, and we wouldn't necessarily be getting these very 2 good talents that we really wanted in the first place.
Yep, it's just a school of thought. I mean, I'm probably always, when it comes to looking at our squad and our draft position and all the rest of it, I tend to always lean to being a bit more aggressive and less conservative. I'm also a big believer that we need to be aware of the fact that we're in a unique situation and we can't operate the same as the Victorian clubs, and that we do have to take retention into consideration, and that is not only the way we draft and trade, but also the way we pay our players. I think our flat pay structure is actually naive, and we should be prepared to pay these first-round Victorian draft picks more money than they're probably worth on the market, and buy a bit of loyalty. That said, I don't disagree with you either, Macca. We got 4 good picks in the first round, and if we nail a couple of them, then that's not a bad deal as long as we can hang on to them. But, personally, I would have liked to have seen us maybe sacrifice a first-round pick along with McGovern to get up the draft, and maybe a future first as well, because we're never going to see 3 players from South Australia in the top 10 again, probably. Not for a very long time.
No, that was a
Very
time.
And that's the unusual part about it, is that they are great talent. We're not just looking at saying, well, let's just look at South Australian kids because, purely for the retention thing. These are high-end talents that will go in the top 10, 2 of them in the top 3. And so the other thing, Fiend, I think is a little bit disappointing is the fact that, these kids didn't just arrive at that point yesterday.
Exactly.
We would have been tracking these kids for years.
Yeah.
And so it is a little bit disappointing, but I'm gonna hold up some hope that 2 things may play out yet. One, there may be a pick swap on the way, or 2, maybe we've got some mail that Rosie's slipping through. That's what I'm going to pin my hopes on anyway.
Yeah.
But,
I wouldn't mind betting if
right.
Matt's got mail that Ben King's on Port's radars, because Port's put it out there, and that might be the biggest red herring you've ever seen.
Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. But, no, you are. Look, if we'd done it, we had to make the move early in the piece like Port did, but we didn't, and we missed out. So I think we take what we've got, and maybe we can trade with St Kilda, but if we don't, I still think we'll end up with 4 good players.
Yeah. It's a bit, you could even extend it further, and I know this is probably rehashing old ground and I don't want to labour the point, but you could also argue that finishing 12th was a complete waste of time, and we didn't have to go to the line that hard, and then we wouldn't have had to have dealt with Fremantle because we would have been below them.
Our boat was going to struggle to crash any lower than it did, though.
Yeah, it would have been nice.
A spirited second half, Donkey, that wasn't really necessary. We played a few blokes injured, a few blokes redid injuries in the second half of the year. Sam Jacobs, was obviously struggling, and we didn't want to play Hunter with O'Brien out, or rejig the side and maybe use JJ or whatever, There were things...
but what I'm saying is I think even the damage was done from the first half of the year. Like our ladder position was actually quite was in a really weird spot. We actually finished about as low as we would even if we won, even if we lost, I think, another 2 games. So,
maybe not. I don't know.
Western Bulldogs finished on 32 wins, 32 points. It was 4 games. It was like going hard at the end is absolutely irrelevant.
I know what you're saying, Fiona. I suspect, and you know what I mean. I suspect that after the Fremantle and Hawthorn efforts, I expect there would have been some messages going downstairs from upstairs that the brand was being seriously damaged.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, one of those things might be true, but there was a 4-game difference between us and the Western Bulldogs. The travesty would have been if we'd managed to sneak ahead of Essendon, Port Adelaide, or North Melbourne. That would have been wasted. But we were at the bottom of our shelf.
Yeah. Look, I think the point is, and Peter alluded to it earlier, we've known that Lukosius and Rankin at least have been on the radar since under 15s, basically. And we've been in a position over the last couple of years to put ourselves in a good spot to take advantage of that. It's not a 1-year strategy, it's a 3-year strategy, isn't it, Peter, or even a 4-year strategy, really, when you're talking about forward planning. And, things like taking Bryce last year for the cost that we did, and that's fine. We we're trying to top up a midfield, very close to a premiership, and we weren't to know what was going to happen this year. But all of those things point to, I think, a little bit of naivety and a little bit of conservatism in our approach to drafting and trading and list management in general. And I don't think it does us any favours. And you can say back your culture as much as you like, and I admire Adelaide for trying to build a culture where players want to stay. But we can't use the same approach that the Victorian clubs use. We just can't do it, not in the way we pay players and not in the way we recruit, in my opinion.
Well, it's hard to argue with that because I think we are very, very conservative with our pay structures, no doubt about that. That's
a fair comment, Feenan. And Magoo, I just pick you up on a point, with the way that the teams finished. It was interesting, wasn't it, when Port had that huge fall, because seeing them play their last sort of 5 or 6 games, it was kind of like, and where they are now in terms of the draft, it was kind of like having a really, really big night, a 4-week binge on the wild turkey, but knowing that around about draft time you're going to have this massive hangover and feel really, really ill, because you knew all the time that every game that they lost, and every time that they fell, there was going to be a price to pay at the draft table.
Yeah. Sounds like my weekend last weekend. Right, so what do you reckon have we done the draft to death, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
All right. Well,
I think so, because we're guessing now, aren't we?
Yeah, let's flick over to some Crows news, shall we? Come on. What's going on in Crows land?
Well, it's been pretty quiet, and there's just been snippets coming out of the club from pre-season training and we had a long chat last week about the 1 to 4 players, and so really it's just steady as she goes. Leading up to the draft, there's really been nothing coming out of the club this week other than those few snippets, unless I've missed something along the way.
The only thing that I've got to add really is a couple of blokes running around this week. We've obviously Hunter's running around looking for a rookie spot. But we've also got James Lonergan from, I think he was originally Sydney?
Yeah, he was
Sydney originally, and he was in our development squad for 2018, and he's running around trying to get a rookie spot as well. A handy player. What is he? Just a medium tall defender, 21 years of age, I think, or thereabouts. So don't know whether there's another. Do we have enough of those?
He'd be a good rookie. Probably. He played all last year in our Sandford team. I think he finished around about 6th. I think in the best and fairest. So he's obviously got some ability. I wouldn't be against picking him up as a rookie. Not, but certainly I can't see us drafting him. But I could see him being a rookie.
I don't think they'll draft him. But, yeah, he's trying to get a rookie spot, and I guess it depends on where we sit with our rookies. There's not a lot else going on at the Crows at the moment. I think everyone's just in holding pattern until draft day. We did have a couple more come back. I think Brodie Smith's come back early for pre-season, and someone else that I can't remember. So, you know, the players continue to show enthusiasm for 2019, but other than that, it's pretty much all quiet in the Western Front.
Definitely.
Indeed.
Mackie, you got any sweets or smacks?
Oh, a couple of little ones, only little ones.
All right, hang on a sec.
Oh, yes, I am a scruffy old man. That's what I am.
Right, go on.
Well, my first tweet is to thank you very much to Matt for coming on tonight, and you could tell he knows a lot more about the draft than we do, and thank you very much for the information and giving up your time for tonight. my second tweet is to Miller, who I hope Burton was watching him, because that's how, when you have a press interview, that's how you talk to the press. You actually answer the questions and give it a little bit of information and get them interested in what you're talking about and not resentful. So I thought Miller handled himself extremely well. And the young players of today, they're quite brilliant with their press interviews. And when you see one do a poor interview, it's actually almost the exception these days. But I thought Miller handled himself very well, the press. So a sweet to him for the way he spoke, and also the fact he's keenness and the fact that he's prepared to play wherever they play him. And he wants to be, he sees himself as a rising leader as well. So that was my sweet. My smacks are not a football one, it's a cricket one. And
oh, God, no.
Yes, and my
Please
smack,
not like last week.
No, this one goes to Head. Head, you have a heap of talent, my boy. You really do. But those things that are hanging off your hips are called legs. And off your legs, you've got feet. And I wish you'd move the bloody things when you try and play that cover drive outside the off stump. To get out the same way 3 times in a row is idiotic. Big smack for you. And that's it.
Can we have a smack to Cricket Australia for putting the cricket on Fox Footy, on Fox?
I've got Fox on, okay, mate.
I just want to ask Macca, have you ever seen a left-hander put his foot to the ball when he's playing a cover drive? I can't think of a left-hander that's played a proper cover drive.
Invariably, you're right. But if you're getting out for it all the time, perhaps you might experiment with it.
I don't think they're physically capable. I reckon Mark Taylor might have been the only bloke I ever saw that actually played a proper cover drive.
He did actually, didn't he?
Yeah.
But you are right. The ones that have the flashy shot generally don't. And it is generally left-handers. But it is foolish to get out repeatedly to the same way.
Yeah. And just to our listeners, I don't know whether people are aware, but Fox Sports have quietly launched their new sports streaming service. You guys across that?
Yep.
Nope.
It's called kosports.com.au. And this isn't a plug for Foxtel. It's actually because it's a pretty good deal. It's $25 a month and you get basically all the Fox channels. It's still in beta, so it's a bit buggy. But there will be apps. So it's been described as Netflix for sports, and that's pretty much what it is. I've been hooking into it and watched the Formula One on it the other day, and there's golf and footy, like all the Fox sports channels basically. So finally there's an
nothing
option.
live though, I assume.
Yeah, all live. It's exactly the same as it's exactly the same as what you get on if you were a Foxtel subscriber.
Okay.
So no contract or anything like that. So finally Foxtel come to the party with a decent package that doesn't make you have to hook into their other crap in order to get sport. So kayosports.com.au I think it is. And like I said, it is in beta, so it's still a bit buggy. But you do get a 14-day trial. So Fox Footy will be on there next year. All the cricket will be on there over summer. It doesn't look like a bad deal, to be honest.
Fair enough.
Sounds good.
And Simon Moyle on the chat, it's far better than the Foxtel Go app that they used to have.
And Pete, just before we go, mate, how are the Fluorio strawberries, mate?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they're unbelievable. I'm not being, I know, they're a sponsor, but I'm not being silly, but bloody hell, they're the most massive strawberries. And to the kids down there, they absolutely loved it. My son, who can be notoriously difficult to entertain, was wanting to go back there Sunday as well. I think that was mainly because he could sit there and make a pig of himself eating strawberries in the field. So, no, it was a really nice afternoon. It was all set up down there, and I really liked the fact that it wasn't just the strawberries. There was a whole lot of other stuff there as well. You could get all sorts of jams, and if you like your chutneys and all those kind of things like I do, you get all that kind of stuff down there, as well as I had some of the really nice fresh fruit sorbet that they make down there as well. So lots of really, really good stuff down there. And, took wife and kids down there, and we had a terrific afternoon. So thanks very much to Adam, and appreciate the offer for a tour for the kids probably in January. And I know that son was really, really keen to get down and have a tour down there. So we'll look forward to catching up again.
Yeah, fair chance. Sorry, make it go on.
I was just going to say, there's 4 of them, so they probably ate 3 kilos out in the paddock and probably bought half a kilo.
Yeah, that was about right.
Fair chance that the Phoenix family will be down at the Flurio this weekend. So I'm hoping that there's a lot more fat, plump strawberries, because I did see a few come out of there last week and they were awesome. All right, guys. Well, we got through it. Apologies again to people that have endured the Spreaker situation. We're very sorry about that, but we will rectify it for on demand. So as soon as we finish off tonight, Phoenix is going to be slaving over a hot desktop to make that all happy. So have a check back in the morning, and you'll have something to listen to on the way into work. Thanks, Donkey and Macca, for joining us tonight again, as usual. Thanks, Pete, for running the show. You did a great job.
No worries.
And we'll see everyone next Tuesday for the last CrowCast before the draft. Thanks very much to Adam and Harvest Furio. We'll see you next week.